Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and yes, we've got a situation.
Pentagon confirms that it has accepted an anonymous $130 million gift to help pay members of the military.
The Trump administration has demolished the White House East Wing.
Trump says the project is being funded entirely by private donors.
There are a lot of crypto connections on the donor list.
So who exactly are these donors paying for military salaries and Trump's $300 million ballroom, and what is it they might want in return?
And relations between the US and Canada sink to new lows over the hostile act of a Canadian TV ad. But first...
Unprecedented? Certainly. Unethical? Probably. Illegal? Perhaps. This week, President Trump stretched the limits of presidential power and conduct beyond a distant point even he has reached before.
Today, bulldozers are taking down the entire historic East Wing of the White House to make way for President Trump's 90,000 square foot ballroom. New satellite images show the White House before and after demolition.
Trump has been talking about building this new ballroom for the White House for months now, and along the way making promises like this.
It won't interfere with the current building. It'll be near it, but not touching it.
And so pretty much everyone assumed that he was talking about not touching the existing White House, including its west and east wings. But then suddenly the east wing was gone.
We determined that after really a tremendous amount of study with some of the best architects in the world, we determined that really knocking it down, trying to use a little section, you know, the East Wing was not much. There was not much left from the original.
According to the Trump administration, that is all perfectly legal because the relevant National Historical Preservation Act makes 3 buildings and their grounds exempt from any review and approval process, including the White House.
When it comes to phase 1 of this project, the tearing down of the current East Wing structure, a submission is not required legally for that. Only for vertical construction will a submission be required.
So they can knock down whatever they like, but they say they will submit construction plans to the National Capital Planning Commission for the ballroom, although it's unclear how long they'll give the commission to review the design or whether they'll listen to any objections. Meanwhile, President Trump rejects claims he hasn't been transparent about his plans.
I haven't been transparent?
That's some of your
really?
feel it
I've shown this to everybody that would listen. Third-rate reporters didn't see it because they didn't look. You're a third-rate reporter, always have been.
But it's not just third-rate reporters who've been taken by surprise.
Now, the National Trust for Historic Preservation warning administration officials the planned 90,000 square foot ballroom will overwhelm the White House itself at 55,000 square feet.
That's right. Trump's ballroom is larger than the main part of the White House itself. And it's not just the sudden destruction of the East Wing or the scale of the new ballroom that's causing concern. It's the fact that Trump has torn up convention and completely gone around Congress, who would ordinarily approve the plans and appropriate the funds to pay for it.
This is an interior shot of the ballroom. I think there'll be nothing like it. And it's being paid for 100% by me and some friends of mine, donors.
And so again, Trump can basically do whatever he likes. But what do those donors get in return for paying for Trump's ballroom? We may never know.
It's a bit of a mystery, John, but I will say this for Trump. He is right that the evidence he was going to demolish the East Wing has been around since July, if you knew where to look. This was the rendering that they released of the projected ballroom back on July 31. You can see this is the main building of the White House, and over there is where the East Wing used to be, now replaced by the ballroom. So that pic was out there since July. But having said that, you did play Trump's wording before in the press conference back in July, and that was, at best, extremely misleading, saying it won't interfere with the current building. I think people would naturally assume the current building doesn't just refer to only the main building, but the East Wing as well. But if you listen to Caroline Levitt from the same day, she was a little more careful with her wording, albeit also clearly trying to obscure the truth.
The site of the new ballroom will be where the small, heavily changed and reconstructed East Wing currently sits. And then this is the exterior of the ballroom space. As you can see, it will come off of the executive mansion as it sits today, and the East Wing will be modernized and renovated.
How much of the East Wing will be torn down? The entire East Wing or just parts of it?
So the East Wing is going to be modernized. The necessary construction will take place, and for those who are housed in the East Wing, including the Office of the First Lady, the White House Military Office, the White House Visitors Offices, those offices will be temporarily relocated while the East Wing is being modernized.
So it's not being torn down and entirely rebuilt, it's just being modernised. Sure. Look, the confusion wasn't helped by the media widely misquoting Leavitt as well. They reported at the time, and continue to report, that Leavitt said nothing will be torn down when she announced that project in July. But Leavitt never actually said that. As the Associated Press now acknowledge in a correction, they incorrectly attributed that quote, "nothing will be torn down," to Leavitt, when actually it was said by a journalist when they were asking a question, not Leavitt. As for the process from here, well, it all seems pretty token at this point. John mentioned maybe Trump would be submitting plans to the National Capital Planning Commission or the NCPC. Well, look, I'm not sure they're going to be providing a lot of resistance to this project. Will Sharf, the Trump-appointed head of the NCPC, also happens to be the White House staff secretary at the moment and was a personal lawyer for the president over the last few years. He's already publicly commented this way: "I think this will be a tremendous addition to the White House complex, a sorely needed addition." So I reckon the fix might be in on this one. But that doesn't mean Trump isn't sensitive to criticism. The Secret Service has notably closed access to the park where journalists have been capturing live images of the demolition. I wonder why. You know, even when presidents do go by the book, White House renovations are often very controversial. Going right back to the first president in the White House, Thomas Jefferson, whose added colonnades were criticised for their cost and perceived extravagance. Then there was Andrew Jackson. When he built the North Portico, he was criticised for supposedly prioritising grandeur over practicality. When Teddy Roosevelt added the West Wing, people said he destroyed the building's historic value. Even when FDR added the East Wing, which we're now talking about being knocked down, it was controversial because he built it during wartime. So it's not surprising that people are currently upset. They usually are. What is new, though, as John said, were these donors. Trump supporters are pretty happy that this isn't costing taxpayer money. I understand the sentiment. But the question many people are asking is, what do these donors like, say, Amazon or Apple, Google, Meta platforms, what do they want in return for their generous donations? Or what about all those crypto industry donors? What do they want? Or the tobacco company donors, or the oil magnate donor, or the other companies who are subject to government regulations? What do they all want? As John said, we just can't know. Maybe you think that we're being overly cynical about all this. Maybe you think we're being partisan. But, you know, only this week, Trump pardoned a fellow named Changpeng Zhao, the founder of a crypto exchange called Binance. Binance pleaded guilty in 2023 to violating US anti-money laundering requirements. And as a result of that, Zhao got 4 months jail, and Binance was barred from operating in America ever again. Now, thanks to this pardon, Binance will likely be able to return to America. And I tell you all that because Binance has coincidentally been one of the main drivers of Trump company World Liberty's cryptocurrency. Binance accepted a $2 billion investment in Trump's cryptocurrency, and what does that mean? It means that they helped World Liberty drive Trump's net worth from $2.6 billion 18 months ago to $7 billion today. So that pardon kind of stinks, and it seems like Trump might be open for business right now. When asked about the pardon, Trump was a little evasive and defensive.
Can you explain why you chose to pardon him, and did it have anything to do with his involvement in your
Which one? Who is that?
The founder of Binance. He has an involvement in your own family's crypto
one,
business.
Yes. I believe we're talking about the same person because I do pardon a lot of people. I don't know. He was recommended by a lot of people. A lot of people say that. Are you talking about the crypto person? A lot of people say that he wasn't guilty of anything. He served 4 months in jail, and they say that he was not guilty of anything, that what he did, well, you don't know much about crypto. You know nothing about nothing, you fake news.
I don't know if that convinced you, John, but I would just add that Changpeng Zhao is one of the richest people on earth. He has access to all the lawyers, and yet he chose to plead to jail time. Do you realise how obviously guilty a person needs to be when they're that rich and they accept jail time without putting up a fight? I would say that Trump has given us good reason to be deeply suspicious about the very large donations to this ballroom.
Yes, indeed. And then, of course, on the weekend, we learned that Trump's mega-rich mates are also not just paying for a ballroom, one of them is now paying for the United States military.
Today, he sent us a check for $130 million. I would love to tell you he doesn't really want the recognition, if you want to know the truth, but he gave us a check for $130 million, which was sort of a shortfall, yeah. And that's going to go to the military, yeah.
That's right. With the federal government shutdown now into its 4th week, the Pentagon has accepted a $130 million anonymous donation to pay active duty troops. Trump wouldn't name the person beyond saying things like this.
That's what I call a patriot.
Sure, and now reports suggest the money actually came from Timothy Mellon, a reclusive billionaire and a major financial backer of Donald Trump, who also donated $50 million to Trump's re-election efforts last year. He was also a significant donor to Robert Kennedy Jr.'s presidential tilt, for what it's worth, and has also given money to RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine group. Now, we don't know what, if anything, Mellon expects in return for that money. Hopefully nothing, because while $130 million does sound like a lot of money, and it is, that's actually a drop in the military ocean. The Defence Department spends $7.5 billion every 2 weeks just to pay all their uniformed soldiers and reservists. So this is less than a day's worth of salaries. Trump has already ordered the Pentagon to shift $8 billion from accounts that fund things like military research, development, testing and evaluation efforts to pay military wages while this shutdown continues. But all of this is happening as the US military continues to sink boats and kill crew members it claims are smuggling drugs from Venezuela. And now deploying the Navy's most advanced aircraft carrier to the Caribbean, the USS Gerald R. Ford. But surely it cannot be legal for anyone other than Congress to be paying for American military personnel. Well, according to the Anti-Deficiency Act, it is probably not legal. Federal agencies, which include the Pentagon, are prohibited from obligating or expending federal funds in advance or in excess of an appropriation. That's money you get from Congress. Once this check is cleared, it becomes federal money, which is in excess of congressional appropriation, Chaz.
And by the way, the Anti-Deficiency Acts might have something to say about those ballroom donations as well.
Indeed it might, yeah.
But once again, like the ballroom, saving taxpayers a little bit of money sounds great, not always a good thing. Back to the shutdown though. Amazingly, even now, it's not biting as much as previous shutdowns have. When it started, only about 25% of federal workers were furloughed or temporarily laid off. But even now, 3.5 weeks later, only 29% of federal workers have been furloughed. The situation, though, is becoming worse. The federal government has told the states they won't have enough money to pay for food stamps from now on, which will jeopardise food payments for 42 million poverty-stricken people. People are starting to receive news about their 2026 health insurance premiums as well, and that news, not very welcome. Premiums hiking from about $307 a month in this tweet to about $964 a month. That's typical of what is going on and what we're seeing on social media, lending weight to the argument that Democrats have been making for the last 3.5 weeks about healthcare premiums. So look, there is pressure on both sides of this shutdown. The result of that pressure, though, is some senators are giving in. This week, Georgia Democratic Senators Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock joined Senator John Fetterman in voting for a compromise bill that would at least pay the military and other federal workers. Bearing in mind the Republicans need at least 7 Democrats to overcome the filibuster, so they need 4 more. The Republicans are sure to bring this bill back next week again and again, possibly next week with a fix for air traffic controller wages, because they are starting to suffer as well, the air traffic controllers. The Democrats have held firm for 12 separate stopgap votes so far during this shutdown, but from here on, every vote is going to get harder.
Yeah, seems that way. For more on all of this private money that is now sloshing around the Trump administration, I spoke to Professor Claire Finkelstein. She's founder and director of the University of Pennsylvania Centre for Ethics and the Rule of Law. Claire Finkelstein, welcome to the program. Let's start with your expert opinion. Is a private donation to pay military wages legal?
Very likely it is not legal. There are multiple reasons why this may be the case. First of all, there's something called the Anti-Deficiency Act. And that act basically says that it's not permissible to have expenditures of the federal government not pass through Congress. So Congress has to authorize expenditures. Congress has the power of the purse. And when there were private donations to go pay the expenses of the federal government, it is generally considered a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act.
Does the federal government shutdown provide any kind of legal loophole here? Because, yes, Congress has the power of the purse strings, but they're not exercising that power at the moment.
So it creates a very good moral reason for Congress to get it together to pass a spending bill. But it doesn't make it legal for a private party to fund government expenditures. And once again, there could be many reasons for that. But a private individual cannot pay for government expenses unless there is a congressional statute permitting it. It's a complicated matter because if a private party pays the expenses of the federal government, they are in effect discharging a debt of the federal government, and that's when you run into the anti-deficiency problems. But suppose a private donor wanted to just give a gift to soldiers and say, this is going to be an extra. This is not discharging a gift. We're just going to give a present to the troops. And there are some situations in which that is permissible. It's permissible to send care packages to troops when they are deployed overseas and so on. But that's not what this situation is. This would be an attempt to pay the wages of the soldiers, and that would be paying down a debt of the federal government, and that's why you run into the anti-deficiency problems.
Is there a point at which writing a combined total of close to $200 million in checks to Donald Trump and his government, does that become illegal for Timothy Mellon to do that? Or is this just about, legally buying access and the ear of the president?
Well, that's the whole problem with this administration, which is they don't seem to understand the whole idea of legal or ethical lines. In fact, they court the violation of those lines. And we see that in the way that the destruction of the East Wing and the payment for the new ballroom has been set up. When they set up a dinner to entice donors, a number of private corporations to come and bid to be donors for the payment of that new ballroom, it's with an implicit suggestion that those companies will get favorable treatment on any number of matters if they donate to this project of the president's. And that's not the way government should work. The president should not be holding a kind of auction for political influence. So it's highly improper. Again, it can be seen as a request for bribes. It can be an exploitation of private parties. We've certainly seen the Trump administration behave coercively with both private corporations, private law firms, and with private educational institutions as well as public educational institutions. So the pay-to-play ethos of this administration is a deep concern. It's a concern about how policy is being made. It's a concern about financial ethics. It's a concern about government ethics, and it's also, frankly, a concern about the ethics of the corporations that are willing to engage in this kind of pay-to-play politics.
Finally, Claire Finkelstein, do you get a sense that there is any appetite to hold Donald Trump to account for any of this? He was impeached twice and disgraced when he left office in 2020, yet he was re-elected after being criminally convicted in the interim. The American people want him as their president.
You've asked now the most important question, because there's any number of means of holding the president accountable, but the question is the will to hold him accountable. Right now, it may be the case that there is not the will to hold him accountable, but that may not always be true. And I think if he is betting on the power that he has consolidated in the current administration, in his current administration, to protect him for all time, that may be a bridge too far. It may be that with a new administration, and indeed after the midterms, with a possible change in the makeup of Congress, he may find himself facing an impeachment investigation, and after the next presidential election, he could find himself once again facing criminal charges on personal capacity crimes.
Claire Finkelstein, thanks for being with us on Planet America.
Thanks for having me.
Last week, President Trump sprung another surprise.
All trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated.
But why?
The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs.
And this is, in part, the ad which was paid for by the government of the Canadian province of Ontario.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
That audio of Reagan was taken from a radio address that he delivered back on April 25th, 1987 on free and fair trade. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute issued a statement after it aired saying this ad uses selective audio and video, and that in their view the ad misrepresents the presidential radio address. It did not say that Canada had fraudulently used the ad, as Trump claimed, but did say the Ontario government did not seek or receive permission to use and edit the remarks. So, what are the facts in all of this? Well, first of all, it is not
fake,
as Trump alleges. We've seen a lot of AI-generated fakes recently, many posted by the president himself, but these are indeed Reagan's words. They have been used selectively. It was a 5-minute address, and this is only a 60-second ad, and they were somewhat reordered. And the ad also edited in the word but. Okay, but does the ad misrepresent the radio address itself? Well, it does ignore some context.
Last week, I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors.
So that's not nothing. Reagan had literally just imposed tariffs himself on Japan. But he did make it clear in that speech he didn't want to do it. And that's why fact-checkers at PolitiFact say that the Reagan Foundation's claim that the ad misrepresents the speech is mostly false. So, what were Reagan's real views on tariffs more broadly? Trump says,
actually, he loved tariffs for our country and its national security.
All right, but did Ronald Reagan love tariffs? No. In fact, Ronald Reagan was consistently an advocate of free trade. He used tariffs only for leverage, to pressure countries like Japan to bring down trade barriers, not to protect American industry. Just 8 months before that other radio address, he'd said this.
High trade barriers, what is often called protectionism, undermines economic growth and destroys jobs. I don't call it protectionism, I call it destructionism.
Nice hat, Mr. President. And he had this warning.
Trying to help workers in ailing industries, We must be careful that the cure is not worse than the disease. Like the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariffs that deepened and prolonged the Great Depression, the best way to help is with pro-growth policies of free and fair trade.
So there are many, many other examples of him saying similar things. Trump is wrong. Reagan did not love tariffs, and he certainly did not see it as a way to make billions of dollars in revenue from American consumers, as President Trump does. Meanwhile, the governor of Ontario Province, Doug Ford, says that they'll keep airing the commercial in America during the first two World Series baseball games between the Toronto Blue Jays and the LA Dodgers, but then they'll pause the campaign effective Monday US time so that trade talks can resume. But it's fair to say, Chaz, that Trump's dummy spit over this ad has certainly given them a lot of free airtime.
It has. You might be wondering, though, why would Trump be punishing Canada for this ad? It was the province of Ontario that took out this ad, not the entire Canadian government. Trump blaming Canada is like another country blaming the whole of America for an ad made by California or New York. Doesn't Trump understand that? Yes, he does. Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett elaborated. Canada, he said, has shown a lack of flexibility in their trade negotiations and also leftover behaviours from Justin Trudeau's people, as he put it. In other words, he means they've been very difficult. And he said, if you look at all the countries around the world that we've made deals with and the fact that we're now negotiating with Mexico separately from Canada, that reveals that it's not just about one ad. So Trump's using this ad as an excuse to vent about his frustrations about negotiations with Canada generally. That might also explain why Trump has just hit Canada with an extra 10% tariff over and above what they were paying before. I'd suggest that none of this is a coincidence, John, that this all arose the day after Prime Minister Mark Carney made this speech here.
This decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States is now over. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner.
And John Carney went on to say that they'd be buying a lot less from America from now on, even when it comes to things like military equipment, say. They are heading down the Made in Canada route. So Trump might be starting to reap what he has sowed when it comes to trade brinksmanship.
After Canada released manipulated footage of Ronald Reagan, the Trump administration has uncovered the following unedited speech showing what Reagan actually thinks.
My fellow Americans, Donald Trump is the greatest American president ever. The force of his intellect is a gift to mankind that honors us all. His hair is definitely not a weapon that is designed by the Soviets. And believe it or not, these tariffs on Canada are absolutely the best designed, most technologically advanced tariffs that even Albert Einstein is said to have admitted he couldn't begin to fathom. Lastly, and maybe most important, Mr. Trump, tear up Jeffrey Epstein's files, destroy those files.
This message has been authorized by Ronald Reagan.
I never miss an episode of Planet America.
Listen to the man.
The Gipper's never wrong. That's it for another trip to Planet America. Do join us again in the Situation Room at the same time next week.
And don't forget the weekend edition on the ABC News on Friday night at 8 p.m. And both shows are on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook. See you there.
Bye.